Jennifer.
Yep, that's me.
Thank you for sitting down with me and having this conversation and having a meal with me. I don't know how hungry you are.
I'm hungry.
You're hungry?
Yeah, and it's hot chicken, so.
Yes. Hattie V's.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this meal. You were smarter to not get a sandwich, which I contemplated, so.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
No problem. For people who may not be familiar with you,
Yeah.
If you want to just give a quick introduction about yourself.
Hopefully, you should not be familiar with me. I'm not that special. I'm unnotable. But let's see. My background, I was an elite gymnast as a child. That was the first time I received some level of notoriety. National team member for like 8 years, national champion. Then about 20 years after I left the sport, I decided to write a book about how abusive the coaches are, the coaching culture is. And that made some waves. I wasn't supposed to say those things. So I got a little bit of mini canceled for that. And then I had a whole career at Levi's and everything. I lived in San Francisco and I opposed COVID lockdowns and school closures in particular and got not mini canceled, major canceled. That's the thing for that. And that's, my life. And now I moved with my family to Denver, Colorado, and I'm sort of starting over at 50 something.
Yeah, your story. So just so you know, obviously, like we met at Freedom Fest last year for the first time in person. Yep. And obviously I knew of you, but I really actually didn't know your story.
Yeah.
And then I watched your PragerU video, which was very well made. And I was like, I had no idea you were a gymnast. Like, I thought that was fascinating because there aren't that many gymnasts.
That is true.
And everything that you went through and things that you're advocating for. I'm like, man, you had a whole entire life. Because I knew you
from the COVID,
Yeah, from Levi's.
Yeah.
But I was like, man, you had an entire career before you were an adult.
I did. That's such an interesting way that you said that because I always say it that way.
Oh, yeah.
And people don't. But I did. I mean, I was training 8, 9, 10 hours a day as a teenager. And it all ended in an unfortunate manner. I mean, I was incredibly injured, very eating disordered, and on a downward spiral. Like, just was losing it, was unraveling. And eventually walked away from the sport feeling completely, like a month before the Olympic trials in 1988, feeling completely disgraced and ashamed. Despite all the successes I had had, I felt like a complete failure and a loser because my coaches told me I was that for, many, many years. And it was very hard to pick up the pieces. And when I went to college, I remember the feeling I had was, I'm going to retirement home. Like, I'm 19, I'm exhausted.
Right.
And everyone else was like, this is amazing. And I was like, just leave me alone. I want to rest, basically. Right. And I then became kind of angry that I had to, figure out my whole life when I felt like I'd had this life and this career. And I met all these people in college that were athletes who would become professional athletes. And even though I couldn't do gymnastics anymore, I was mad about that because it was like I was as good as you were in my sport and now I have to start over.
Wow. Yeah.
So, I had a whole career before going to college, basically.
It's not too hot.
I could have gone one level up.
You could have? Oh, yeah. Okay. I think this is hot enough for me.
I could have gone.
What did you get? A medium or mild?
I got medium.
You got medium? Oh, so you're doing better than me. So this is medium, and I feel like this is at my breaking point.
That's your limit. Yeah. My kids would make fun of you. They make fun of me, and this is fine. I could go hotter.
When I was growing up, we didn't really have spicy foods. Like my mom, and she admits, I made it bland, but she makes it bland because of how she grew up. She was taught to make it bland because of her relatives preferring it more
Right.
bland. So I literally had to go out of my way to have spicy foods
Right.
to develop a palate.
Acclimate a little bit.
Yeah, but there was a point I couldn't take any spice because I didn't have
So you've
any.
trained yourself now to eat.
I trained myself.
Eat a little bit spicier.
Yeah. When I started traveling abroad, that was the opportunity to have different types of food, experience different spices, especially Indian food.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not my favorite cuisine, but it's not the spiciness. I'll eat it. It doesn't. I don't like how I feel after I eat it.
Really?
It gives me like terrible indigestion. That you need to hear this. But I like it. I like spicy. My son would disagree. He makes food very, very spicy. He likes to cook. He says I complain too much about the spice, but I think it's really spicy. It's like way spicier than this.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I happen to live in one of the most highly populated Indian populations in the country.
So you probably eat a lot of Indian food. It's probably really good.
It's really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
We are not short of choices of Indian restaurants where I live at in Jersey.
What about Ethiopian?
I don't think we have any.
That
feels like something I'd have to go into New York City for.
You know where they have a lot is D.C.
D.C. I didn't realize they had an Ethiopian population. I've heard mixed on Ethiopian.
I don't like it. My husband loves it. My sons love it. So they all eat it together. I'm like, no. Not for me. And you eat with your hands, which that doesn't bother me. That's fine. Anyway, not my favorite.
But my favorite food in general is Turkish.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I lived in Turkey as a child briefly. A couple of years. My dad was a doctor in the Air Force. We lived on the military base. And I was like 3 and 4, so.
Do you remember?
I do.
Okay.
I mean, flashes,
Yeah.
My brother was born there, so oftentimes that's a first memory, right? When your sibling comes home from the hospital. I remember that. And we would go and eat Turkish food and just, we'd go into the city from the base. And we traveled some to Greece, so I have like vague memories of swimming in the ocean and that kind of thing.
That's nice.
Yeah. But yeah, they wanted an adventure.
I feel so filthy right now.
It's a messy dinner.
It's a messy dinner. I've actually been to Turkey 2 times. I'm going this year.
Yeah.
Going back. Drive around the Turkish Riviera.
Nice.
But I went there for my honeymoon with my wife.
Oh, you did? That's pretty cool.
And it's so interesting. Like, part of the thing I like about traveling is you meet different people and you experience different cultures. But for me, it's like there are things that are different.
Yeah.
But it's so fascinating the things that are the same.
Oh, what do you find to be the same there?
I think just like how I travel throughout America, there's a general kindness about people. Like, I think most people want to help, especially if they see that you're someone who's not from there.
Yeah.
They take hospitality to like another level.
Yeah.
Like, they do certain things, like they'll give you the food that they're eating, and that's something that you won't really see in America much.
Right.
But there is a level of generosity that I see from different people from all over the place that I've traveled, whether it's asking for help, directions, making sure you're okay.
Yeah. Have you found any place that is notably not like that? Where you're like, well, those people were not friendly.
It's so funny. Everybody talks about France.
I love it there. I don't find that to be the case there.
I think it's one of those things that people just say.
I think so too.
Is it, like, do these people exist? I'm sure they exist everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, New Yorkers don't really like tourists that much because they get in the way.
Yeah.
But like, it doesn't mean that all. Well, listen, I brag on New Yorkers. Some of it's kind of true. They're a different type of people, but when you get to know them, they're actually pretty.
Well,
common.
so I'm from Philadelphia, which can be similar, and there's a gruffness, but that's just how they talk. They would do anything. They would help you when you need. At least that's my experience. Like Philly, there's a real gruffness, but they'd always help. I don't know. You can't take the tone as too seriously. You have to just sort of accept it. I find them to be nice and helpful. Versus San Francisco, where I lived for many, many years, 30 some odd years, which I loved. I don't think I realized until I moved to Denver how not friendly the people in San Francisco are and how aloof they are and how much it's a very unfriendly, it's very unwelcoming to children. I don't think I'd raised 2 children there already, so I don't think I really realized it until I went to a place that clearly loves and embraces children. There's no events that there's no children allowed. Like, it's not like that. I know every neighbor on my block. I mean, this doesn't say much for me and how friendly or not friendly I am, but like I lived in the same apartment for almost 10 years and I didn't know any of my neighbors.
I don't think that's uncommon though.
No, I don't think I even noted it until I got to Denver. And like when we moved into our house, there was a dinner party for us where the whole block came. And then there was like a little block party for us. I was like, oh my God, this is how nice people act.
Yeah.
So yeah, San Franciscans are quite aloof, I guess I would say.
So, and it's funny you said like they're not really friendly to children.
It has the lowest percentage of children of any city in America.
Would that have to do with having a lot of a large gay population? Would that be? You think that's part of it?
Part of it.
Okay.
I mean, now gay couples are having kids whether they're adopted but certainly that's part of it. But I think there's a lot of money, and there's a lot of couples with two high-power jobs, and they like don't think about kids until they're 43, and then they're like, oh shit, we better spend a bunch of money and have a baby. But one's enough. I don't know. It's just like not building a family is not the priority. Career, and there's a lot of people that choose not to have them. And this is what I think makes the city unfriendly is they choose not to have them, and I'm making gross generalizations, but I'll just do that.
Yeah.
They feel like that gives them the right to never be around them. And you're like, no, children are part of the community. Like just because you chose not to have them doesn't mean that you get to never see one. But they get very annoyed if your child is acting like a child in a restaurant, that kind of thing. And I actually think the fact that it's so unfriendly to children, on top of having a very low percentage of children, lowest in the country, and I think it's probably declined further since COVID because the COVID policies there surrounding children were so restrictive. They also have the highest percentage of children in private school. This is related to COVID because just no one gave a shit that the public schools were closed. There aren't that many children. There aren't that many public school children. I mean, there's 50,000, but it just is not a priority in the city,
Wow.
And I raised 2 children there. I mean, I liked it. They had a good experience, but I just now live in a much more child-friendly place, and I can see.
You see the vast difference. Yeah.
Yeah, people are helpful. I don't know. It's more pleasant.
You know what kind of reminds me of? So, I'm sure you've met New Yorkers, and you probably know what I'm talking about. New Yorkers feel like New York has everything, so I don't need to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you tell them, well, there are stuff outside of New York, like why would I get up and go outside of New York? Like they really struggle with that.
Right.
Meanwhile, like everything is chaotic, everything's falling apart. But they're like, this is the greatest city in the world. It's a weird mindset. So my wife is from Brooklyn, and she had been living in Queens for a period of time. She ended up moving out of the city, but she stayed close enough to the city. And we were trying to decide, like, do we want to stay here, north of the city, or do we want to move elsewhere? Because she wanted a particular type of apartment.
Yeah.
I said, we can't afford it. And she's like, well, where can we afford it? I was like, I mean, we can afford it in Jersey. It's not bad.
Yeah.
She's like, Jersey?
Yeah.
Jersey? And it wasn't until we really started looking, and she was like, man, we really can't afford this. I was like, yeah, we cannot afford to stay in New York for what you want to get.
Right.
So then, because I was actually commuting between New York and New Jersey. I said, when I go to work, take my car and just drive around and pick a place. I really don't care. Just pick a place. So she did that. She's like, there's really a lot of nice towns around here.
I think I lived in South Jersey for much of my adolescence, and I think Jersey's, it gets made fun of relentlessly. It's not fair. It's pretty nice.
We make fun of New Jersey.
I know, but it's pretty nice.
It is pretty nice.
The quality of life is good. It's pretty nice.
It is. The only downside, the beaches are depends on it's not the greatest in the world, but it's nice to have a beach.
Yeah.
I'll say
okay,
that.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the downside of living in New Jersey is just the cost of living. But it's still better than New York. That's kind of like the...
That's fair. Yeah. My issue, and I loved San Francisco like nothing. I mean, because of my gymnastics, I moved around a lot as a child because I was switching gyms all the time. I went to 3 different high schools. There's a lot of different high schools. So I never felt really any sense of place or home growing up, you know? And so I got to San Francisco. I moved there right after college. I went to college at Stanford and then moved a half hour north to the city, 45 minutes north. And it was like the first place, I just loved it. It was like, I moved there in 1992. Arguably, you know, I went to college in 88, so I was already kind of acclimated to the Bay Area.
Right.
And it was like, I tell people this all the time. It's like, if you ever felt like a weirdo in your life, San Francisco was the place. You know, they say, what's the keep Austin weird? Like, no, San Francisco was the weirdest. I mean, I remember my dad came and helped me move in. He's like, I feel like I'm leaving you at the end of the earth. Like, what is going on out there? I lived in Haight-Ashbury. I was like, it's the best. You know, I just felt weird and like an outsider, and it was like all okay. And it's just so, I loved it for that. For 30 years, even though I saw it change with the tech boom, because it's not like that now. It's just really like young, rich Google millionaires, right? Mostly. And it's a one industry town, which is boring because everybody's doing the same thing and trying to, you know,
one up each other,
make $1 gazillion off their whatever.
Yeah.
The artists can't afford to live there anymore. There isn't really an art community. The teachers who teach there can't afford to live there. So it makes for I think any one industry town is super boring. You know, DC is a one industry town, you're in government. LA is a one industry town, it's entertainment. Yeah. SF is tech. And it's so effing boring. And so it started to change, but I was like attached to it for what it had meant to me when I moved there when I was, 22.
Right.
And it is now a place of such aggressive conformity, but it still thinks it's not. It's like self-deluded.
Yeah. As you were describing it, you know what a city reminds me of? And I don't know if you've ever been there, but it reminds me of Berlin.
I have been to Berlin.
So you kind of understand, like, Berlin is different, especially if you've been to Berlin and then you've been to other places in Germany.
Yeah.
And even Germans would be like, Berlin is its own thing. There is no other place. And you go there and you realize all the kids who grew up in more conservative villages, and, they could go to Berlin and just be accepted. They could be weird.
That's what I would say Berlin is like San Francisco was. And you have arty people from across Europe going there, even Americans. It's like this expat community, and you can live for still pretty cheap. Relatively, yeah. I mean, when I was there, I don't think I've been there in 10 years. It was probably cheaper then. Yes, it's young and arty, and you can sit in cafes and, read books and poetry and smoke cigarettes. And it's like, that's what San Francisco was. It's not anymore.
Everybody it's the Berlin uniform. Everyone wears black. It's just like, all right.
Yeah. San Francisco. I mean, there was the hippies, and you had the old hippies that were still there, like from the 60s, literally still, like the very old hippies. You had the skaters and the punk. You had all of it.
That's so Berlin. You can go into a club, and you see all ages.
Yeah.
And especially like you see people, because their clubs are famous, you see people from all over Europe come into the nightclubs, and they're all either 40 years old, 20 years old. Like, and it's not, I don't really see that. Even going to like New York clubs, it's not the same. It's very young oriented.
Yes.
It's weird. I almost moved to Berlin some years ago. I'm glad I didn't. Because I realized like freedom of speech is really important, and not everybody has freedom of speech, or not every country has it.
But don't you think in East Germany in particular, there's like a collective memory of not having had it?
No. You
don't?
So there's a saying in German. I'm trying not to butcher it because I've been studying German. It's called alles in Ordnung, which means everything in order. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of, you would say it in response to like, how are you doing? Everything's okay? That, yeah, everything is in order.
Got it. Okay.
So that gives you a mindset of what German people are like. Generally speaking, order is very important. So hierarchy is important. Mm-hmm. Going along with this is what we're supposed to do, following the rules. Right. They don't jaywalk. Okay. Like I've literally heard stories where people get chastised for jaywalking.
Interesting.
And so when you have that, and then you have COVID happen.
Yeah, you fall in line.
It's
just interesting because as I was, sort of becoming, well, I was instantly a COVID dissenter from, March 13th, 2020. But
yeah,
as I sort of got a little bit of a following for that, the people that, like, I was stopped once on the street in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. I was out walking or running or something, and some guy with this heavy Russian accent, he starts, like, chasing me. And he was like, you, I want to talk. And I was like, what is this weirdo? He's, like, chasing me. Mm-hmm. Well, he recognized me. Mm-hmm. And in a very heavy Russian accent, he said, and I'm not going to try to imitate it, but, like, thank you for what you're doing, both you and your husband. People here don't know. I mean, the implication being, I know what it is to live under communism. I know what it is to live without freedom. I know what that is when the government has all control and they offer you safety in exchange for freedom.
Yeah.
And that happened to me more than once. I mean, not being run down on the street, but like, the one person at work, when I was going through it, and it was, difficult, that said, I hear you, grew up in Bulgaria. Mm-hmm. So I would just think there would be some of that during COVID there, but I guess not. They were very.
I think, yeah, a lot of people understood. I knew, it's funny you mentioned someone who's Ukrainian who was like, no,
I'm not doing this.
I'm not doing this. Like
And when you go to Berlin and you tour Berlin, you see the wall, you see where they used to, the watchtower where they were watched from. It's like very much, obviously, a part of the history.
Yeah.
But COVID broke everyone's brains.
It did. It just made everybody scared. And I think about my son. There was one point in time, he's very rational, but he's like, should I be worried? And we had like this conversation, and he was like, that's kind of what I was thinking, but okay. And,
what did you tell him?
I said, yes, some people are dying from this, but you, someone who's in high school, you'll be fine, even if you were to get sick. Right. So the people who are most affected are really old and really unhealthy.
Right.
And
really
or
old
both.
Still by a long shot.
Right.
Even over the unhealthy. I mean,
exactly.
Like, age was by far and away.
Yeah.
Most significant comorbidity.
That's the most significant thing. So, explaining that to him and him being open to hearing what I have to say, it was about getting rid of that fear because.
But did you know that from the beginning? Like, did he ask you that early on? And if you knew from the beginning, how?
I knew because I was watching what was happening in Italy.
Yeah, me too. That's what I always say.
Yeah.
And the median age of death was like 81, right, from the beginning.
And Italy has, I know it has the oldest population in Europe.
Yeah.
but one of the oldest populations in the world.
Yes.
And so it makes sense why it would be more detrimental there than other places.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, so we know that it's really detrimental for people who are older. So then let's mitigate it.
Right.
It reminds me, I sat down with Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, and I'm telling him all this. He's like, yeah, that was the plan. That was the Barrington Declaration. This is what we were trying to advocate for. And they said, no.
Yeah.
Everybody must do the same exact thing. Yeah. And it was kind of like, COVID was the loss of common sense.
Completely.
And it was just it was infuriating because I'm talking to people who are scared, and I'm trying to be logical and trying to do the thing that we always did. And they said, no. COVID's different. I was like, but how's COVID different? It's a virus.
Yeah.
Like, how, even down to ask a second opinion.
Yeah. No. Oh, yeah, that's always normal.
That was always normal. You get a
diagnosis or prognosis and you go see someone else. No, not anymore.
No, what are you trying to do? Think for yourself? No.
Yeah.
Just Fauci said,
yeah.
Listen to this bureaucrat and do the thing that he said to do. Even though he changed his mind, masks work, masks don't work.
He changed his mind, and everything they said was going to happen, it wouldn't happen. And then they'd move the goalpost, and there'd be some. It's like, do you not realize that what they said was going to happen 2 weeks ago didn't happen? Everyone lost their minds.
Right.
Yeah. I still can't believe it.
I can't, but I feel like I'm not one of those people who thinks like this was completely planned.
I don't think that either. In fact, this is an interesting line of discussion, because if you were early disbeliever, you found kind of a community there weren't very many of us.
Yeah.
Or I shouldn't even say disbeliever. That's not the right way to put it. An early COVID dissident that you're like, hell no, we're not doing this.
Yeah.
I lost my train of thought. Where was I going? Hold on. What were we just saying? I'm old. I'm having old
if
brain.
It was planned or not.
Oh yeah. So that's right. Thank you. I've never been. There was always like a very conspiracy-minded faction within the COVID dissenters, right? Always. And I always was like, that's not, okay. We both think lockdowns are bad. We think the mandates are bad, but like, I don't think what you think, but that's fine. Like, I don't have any friends left. But what's crazy is October 7th happened. Sorry, I'm jumping way ahead. Mm-hmm. And, at this point now, the COVID dissident community is like, that's my community. And the friends that I do have, I met during the last 3 or 4 years because of our dissenting. And suddenly October 7th happens. I wake up October 8th. By October 9th, the most conspiracy-minded COVID dissidents revealed themselves. Because if you think there's a guy in the back room that's like planning all this, they think he's Jewish. Like all of a sudden I was like, it was so shocking to me how quickly the anti-Semitism just came to the surface from the most conspiracy-minded within my own COVID community.
Yeah. That's something that I noticed underneath the surface. You read comments here and there.
I just never...
But that was like their Super Bowl, right?
The October 7th.
Yeah.
They're like, I can let it all out now. Yeah. I was shocked.
I wasn't, because I saw it coming. I saw it just took for one event. You saw the leftists, and then you saw the white supremacist guys, and they found the common ground enemy, right? Jews. They must be the problem.
Yeah.
And see, that's why I tend not to believe the conspiracies, because I know people don't work together that well.
Well, that's what my husband and I always say. We're not good at keeping secrets.
No.
We're not good at executing plans. We're not I'm sorry, we can't even do the things we're supposed to do together. Like, do we really think that there's like 4 guys that can pull off this insane conspiracy and no one's found out about it? It just seems so unlikely to me.
Right. Like, especially if you're talking about like bureaucrats and stuff like that, who we know are not the brightest people in the world.
No.
Right? So,
but the people who believe in it are so non-specific. Well, it's not them. They're the useful idiots.
yeah.
Well, then who is it?
The other guys that you can't see.
Right. Who? Give me names. I want to know. Who are they?
Yeah. Listen. And then what they'll do is say, the CEOs from this and that, so that must mean that. I was like,
no, it doesn't.
So you think that where they have some Jewish meeting, they get together, it's like, how? So listen, hey, head of the media and head of the music industry, how can we like? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know.
And it's that I'm like, this is extremely unlikely. Or these people just happen to be Jewish and they happen to be doing really well.
Right.
You know,
right.
They didn't have to conspire.
No.
Maybe they grew up in a very good culture.
Right.
Well educated.
Values education.
And actually, what's funny.
And maybe they work in banking because they weren't allowed to participate in the normal workplace culture, so they started their own and they became. I mean, they built their own systems essentially. We, my people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't believe in the mustache twirling. You know, I don't think Bill Gates is that. I think he's misguided. And I also think, I think that there are evil things done. Yeah. No one thinks they're evil. They think they're doing good in the world.
At most, I think most people, they think they're doing good, but they rationalize their stuff so they don't feel evil.
Yes.
Right? Because, see, I think that's a human thing. No one wants to be evil.
No one thinks of themselves as the bad guy.
Right? I'm just helping transgender children.
Right.
I'm not mutilating them. I'm helping them.
Right. Or COVID, Fauci, who I think of as having done real harm.
Right.
That's not a popular view in my family. But, I mean, my husband and I agree. But he thought he was doing good, and they were noble lies. And, you know, he was, I mean, as Francis Collins, we heard say very recently, we just weren't thinking about those other things. This is all we think about, which was our point all along. We know that's all you're thinking about. You're not thinking about the fact that children are missing school. Poor children are the most at risk in this situation. They're home alone. They're home with multiple siblings. All the people you purport to be helping are the ones you're hurting the most because you're just not thinking about them. And Francis Collins at this point has admitted that. We knew that all along. Mm-hmm. But they believed what they were doing was the right thing, and they didn't see how damaging and hypocritical and selfish it was. And all the people screaming, we're in this together, stay home, stay safe, and ordering, they got to see themselves as heroes. They liked that. Yeah. To get to be, you know, virtuous for doing nothing. Wow. What a gift.
Yeah. COVID showed me how many tyrants actually exist. Like, because you don't know who's a tyrant until you give them power, right?
Petty tyrants everywhere.
And I'm going to run up on you with my cell phone because you don't have your mask over your nose, right? Yeah. So he's not scared of the virus if you have it.
Yeah.
He wants to be a tyrant, and he wants to brag about, you know.
And feel like he's done good. He's wrapped himself in a cloak of virtue, turning the bad people over. It's like people in East Germany, you know, they turned on their family. They turned in their friends. Mm-hmm. At first during COVID, when this was happening, and this happened a lot, I'll tell you a story. So right in the summer of 2020 in San Francisco, we were allowed finally to go out of the house. We were told you can have picnics in the park, but only with your family.
Wait, is somebody coming over to be like, excuse me, are you family?
Just wait for it. So we're like allowed out of the house. I mean, you literally were not really allowed to do that before June or July of 2020, which is ridiculous. You weren't allowed to go sit in the park unless you were alone. So we go, my family, 4 children, big family for San Francisco. And the children don't all look alike. You know, my older children are mixed race. My younger children are not. They're very far apart in age. So I guess we don't look like one household, kind of, if you're an idiot and you can't think creatively. So we're sitting there, we had balls, we were playing, a little soccer, basketball, whatever, we had food. And I see this woman like across the way, and she's like looking at us and like texting and like, and she's like very, and I said to my husband, she's texting 311. They set up a special text line that you were supposed to text if you saw people violating the rules. It was the whole, like, if you see something, say something.
Yeah.
So 2 minutes later, police come over to us, to me and my husband, so to validate that we all lived in one household. These are the kind and generous left.
Right. Meanwhile, 85 people run into a store and steal stuff, and
they just need bread to be
there.
Yeah. But yeah, I had another woman. I was with my daughter at the beach. She was like 3 at the time, my daughter. And the beach in San Francisco is cold. No one goes, it's not like populated. It's cold. But we would go there as like the playgrounds were closed. So we would take our dog and we would run around at the beach. Mm-hmm. And a woman, older woman, we did not have masks on at the beach. And it was in the beginning of the masking. Like, I was like, no one's going to do this, right? This is stupid.
Right.
Like, I still thought it was, like, optional. My husband was like, you're going to find out fast. It's not. So we didn't have our masks on alone at the beach. And a woman came over and screamed in my face, I won't feel sorry for you when your children die. Mm. And that's when I was like, we have lost our minds. We have lost our minds. And there was one other incident. In the very early days, I was out kind of hunting for toilet paper, I think. And a woman was struggling to get her stroller inside her apartment building. She's like with the gate. And so I held the door for her. Don't touch my door. Get away from me. Get away from me. And I felt so bad for her. Like she said, you're getting COVID on the door. You've touched the door. Now I have to disinfect the door. And I came home and I said to my husband, I was like, we've lost our minds. Like, people think when and the streets were empty. It was empty. And I said, people really think they're in a war zone. Like, they think if they cross the threshold of their homes, it's like entering a war zone. And I sort of felt bad for them. Yeah. What a terrible way to live. Of course, if you're that terrified. But then I got mad at them.
It went from empathy to anger.
Yeah, very fast.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the most illogical time period. Like, I remember during the pandemic, I remember like looking up I would realize they were older, but like I would look up videos of like concerts and stuff. I was like, that was what it was like before COVID.
The before time. Yeah. Yeah, but don't you remember in like, it wasn't even the early days. It was like the whole first year, like Fauci was like, we'll never shake hands again. We should really not ever have those kinds of large events again. I mean, they were saying this.
Yeah, this is the new normal. It was
driving me completely mad. I was like, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
I want to go to the movies with a lot of people. I want to go to I don't even like football, a football stadium and cheer with 60,000 fans. I want to go to a basketball game. But they were telling us that was decadent. Mm-hmm. And we should never have lived that way. And we needed to rethink the way we all live to prevent the spread of infectious diseases.
Right.
And I was like, no. What do you mean we'll never shake hands again? That's ridiculous. But people were nodding along.
But the big slap in the face was all these mayors and governors
doing whatever
they wanted. Gavin Newsom.
Every single one. For a while I was keeping track and the number got too big. It was like every single. Gavin is the most sort of famous.
It's the most audacious.
Right, because he was at French Laundry eating like a $900 meal.
But it was also who he was with.
Yes.
The medical lobby.
Well, and it was California, and so we had the strictest. We were locked down the longest.
Right.
Our playgrounds in San Francisco were closed for 10 months. Outdoor playgrounds. So it was the most audacious in that regard.
Yeah.
And then Nancy Pelosi at the hair salon. I mean, it goes on. Our mayor, Michael Hancock in Denver. I mean, it went on. What's her name? Gretchen Whitmer and her husband. And
Bill de Blasio.
Everybody. It was just everybody.
The rule makers can't follow their own rules.
So you're like, really? Are you that scared? You're not scared either.
They weren't scared. But that's why I think about, are these people that malicious or they're just incompetent? So if most of them tend to be incompetent, then they're probably just opportunists.
I think there's a variety of actions at play.
Yeah.
I think Gavin is a particularly malignant, selfish, power-hungry narcissist.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Yeah. I think Barbara Ferrer, just so stupid that I long for the day I don't know the public health leaders in each of the cities in America. She's the LA County public health. She's the one that looks sort of like Skeletor. I don't know if you remember her.
Yeah.
Particularly draconian rules there. I don't think she is. I think she is a hypochondriacal, terrified person that really thinks she's helping. Mm-hmm. We gave the neurotic, people who we would have considered sort of with some pity for their neuroses, we elevated them to insightful geniuses that need to be respected.
Right.
We took the most neurotic among us and we said, that's what we have to kind of elevate and respect.
Right.
So I don't know. I think it's a range. I do think Gavin is particularly, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know.
Calculated?
I think he's particularly calculated and power hungry.
Yeah, and he has a lot of power.
Yeah, and if you have the governor of California, the biggest state, doing this, then you had this sort of coalition of left coast governors, Kate Brown, and all sort of going along. But Kate Brown probably could have pulled in another direction if Gavin hadn't done that. And nobody used their brain.
No. Once there becomes a narrative, everybody, especially politicians, they typically do what's safe.
Yes, and that became the safe thing. But this shouldn't take a while to come back to me. It's all I thought about for 4 years. But why? Why? Was Gavin just gonna? I felt very strongly, and he didn't give up his emergency powers for, I think, well over 3 years, long after. They were never warranted. But why did this happen? Why did it become left versus right, blue versus red?
Oh, because it was an election year.
Right. That's where I was going. Is that what you think? Yeah. But then why didn't the genie go back in the bottle after Biden won? I have my own opinions. I'm asking you.
Because they realized how much power they could gain from declaring everything an emergency. Yeah.
And at that point, it was in the ether and they couldn't get it back.
Yeah.
Even if they tried. They terrified the populace. They divided them into good and evil. Good people wear masks and stay home and never want to shake hands again. Mm-hmm. Bad people believe in freedom. And you can't put that genie back in the bottle, even if they wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the saddest part of COVID, because it became political, was when someone who was on the right would pass away.
Oh yeah.
And people would be gleeful.
Dancing on their graves of the unvaccinated.
You don't want to put your mask on. Look at you now. You're dead. Yeah. And the dancing on the grave thing.
That was the LA columnist. He's one of the worst.
Yeah, to me, that was that's the evil.
It is the evil. Or, Leanna Wen saying, you don't have to get vaccinated, but then we're going to seal you in your homes and you don't have the rights that other citizens have. Rights are earned. Well, no, they're not, actually. Not if you're an American, they're not earned.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of that, and there was a lot of cheering for that, and there was a lot of, cordon off the unvaccinated. And if you pointed out that that kind of separation of people, mm-hmm. whether it be in the Jim Crow South, or, the Jews in Germany having to wear yellow stars. And I don't want to catastrophize to the degree of saying, it was I recognize that it wasn't, but it doesn't ever lead you anywhere good.
Right.
To separate people into good and bad categories and say these people don't have rights. Now, if you said that, and I got in a lot of trouble for drawing those analogies, it was, yes, but being unvaccinated is a choice. So they deserve it because they're making a poor choice. Whereas being black's not a choice, being Jewish wasn't a choice or isn't a choice. But those unvaccinated people, that's a choice. So they deserve it. They're dirty, they're evil, they're filthy. And that's the way Jews were talked about in Germany. They were a virus.
Right. Clean versus unclean.
Clean versus unclean.
Yeah.
Never goes anywhere good. But I will say, I never thought I would live through people that I thought of as friends behaving in such a manner. And I thought as we were going through it, there's something distinctly evil happening in the world right now. And then the more I sat and thought about it and read on it, and I realized, no, this is how people always are. There's nothing particularly unique across time, across geography, over and over. And it's validated through studies over and over again. People they're obedient. They'd rather stand with the crowd than do the right thing and stand apart. And it happens time and time again. Just forever. Yeah. And the Milgram experiment, the Stanford prison experiment, it all sort of bears it out. And I know some of those are flawed, but whatever. They're the general. And I somehow felt better realizing that. Like, this is just how people are.
We were talking about acceptance before.
Yeah.
Like, that's one of those things that I accept. I know there are people who are like, man, I'm speaking out. Why isn't everybody speaking out? It's like, no, because that's not what people do. Yeah. Right? If you're one of those people willing to stick out your neck, you have to understand you're going to stand alone for quite some time. Yeah. But you sticking your neck out inspires other people.
Begets courage. What annoys me, though, is the people, and this is how I see much of the left, my political party for my whole life. Mm-hmm. They think, here, I'll give you a specific example. So when did John Lewis die? It was like the summer of 2020, I think.
Yeah.
It was like right in that whole morass. And all of my friends who didn't hate me yet were posting, good trouble memes as if they were good trouble. Mm. And I'm like, you've never been in any trouble at all. Your whole life, you don't know a single person that disagrees with you on any matter. You've never been the only person in a room to say something and have everybody disagree with you. Do you know what that feels like? And then to stand by it and say it anyway, and then to double down and say it again. They don't know, but they think they're these dissidents, and they literally don't know a single person and wouldn't dare even be friends with a single person that disagreed with them on anything. That's what annoys me, is if you're going to go with the crowd, fine, but don't pretend you're the one sticking your neck out. Right. Everybody wants to think of themselves
as the hero, the one who stood up. No, most people aren't. That's like the people who say, well, if I was in Nazi Germany, I wouldn't have. No, you likely would have.
Yeah. Well, my husband, he was, now I know. Now I know. My own family. He actually, had a fight with one of his family, not even a fight, he said to one of his family members, you would have turned in Anne Frank. Now we're all Jewish, so it's like, it doesn't totally make sense. But most people would.
Yeah. But I think.
But then there's people that we were in Israel this summer. Last summer. We were there for 2.5, 3 weeks. My family, my husband's 2 siblings, their spouses, and all the kids. And my mother-in-law. She planned this amazing trip for us. My husband was born there and lived there for many years, and then served in his 20s in that idea. So it was like cool to get to go and have his family, show us. And when you go, our last visit on this amazing tour was to Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem. Mm. And there's a room at the end of the museum that's dedicated to the righteous among the nations. And they're the people who saved Jews. It was the only time in the whole trip I cried. It's an amazing, I mean, it's just, there's people, regular people. They risk their lives. They save thousands sometimes. Just regular people.
Like with Oscar Schindler.
Like that.
Yeah. There's
this Portuguese diplomat. I don't know why this was the story that stuck with me. He was a Portuguese diplomat. He was in Poland, and there were Jews that were wanting to get out as they, knew that this was coming. And he wrote visas, just blank visas, to whoever asked so they could leave, go to Spain, and then, oftentimes go to America. And when Portugal got word of what he was doing, they summoned him back. You can't do that. You have to come back to Lisbon. And as the story goes, I don't know if it's true, but probably, as he was on the train being kind of deported back to Lisbon, he was throwing blank visas out the window. He was trying to save as many people as he could. And he died penniless. But at the end of his life, his heroism was recognized. And he was asked, I'm not going to try to get the quote right, but you should look it up later. I can't even say it without crying when I read it. But he said, no, I could never have done anything else. How could I have ever done anything else? If so many Jews can suffer at the hands of one Christian, then one Christian can suffer to save so many Jews. That's basically what he said.
Wow.
He said to have saved at least 10,000. And you hear that and you're like, people are amazing.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, in the midst of evil, there are always good people, right? And there's always someone who's trying to push back and fight back against evil. And that's why I feel like we're in a different era and the evil looks different. But, we talked about, like, there aren't that many evil people, but there are definitely evil actions.
For sure.
And even if your intention is good.
Yeah, it's the banality of evil that Hannah Arendt, right? Like, I mean, that was the people calling the police on us.
Yeah.
Those are evil actions. That person does not think of herself as an evil person, and she probably isn't.
Yeah. But I think the most evil thing that's happening is mutilating children.
I would agree.
Yeah. I have a friend and like, when you start doing stuff like this, you meet people from all different types of backgrounds. And I have a theologian friend, and I might be butchering a little bit what she says, but she says, people misinterpret the Bible all the time. Like, she studies the Bible. Okay. So she doesn't give, like, interpretation, based off how she feels. She studies it. So she knows, like, yes, it says this line, but let me give you all the full context of everything. Right. So I trust her more than other people. Yeah. But what's interesting, she says, like, people try to say, like, God came in and he's all mighty and he just, like, kills everybody. They try to make it seem like that. She says, do you know why in the times that he's done that? When they start harming children.
But I'm going to come back to my gymnastics.
Yeah.
So the way that we were treated as young gymnasts, coached, I mean, it's horrific, honestly. It's like no normal person thinks this is okay. Yeah. And it was very much like a closed off little world, and normal people didn't know. But I mean, I trained on a broken ankle for 2 years. We were weighed in twice a day. Our weight was announced on the loudspeaker. If you gained a quarter pound, you were berated as a fat pig. And you had to, stay after your 8-hour practice to run an hour in a plastic sweatsuit to, lose the quarter pound. Keep in mind, you're 18 and you weigh 98 pounds and have 2% body fat already, and you're being berated. We were told, lose weight by any means necessary. They didn't care if you were gobbling laxatives, vomiting. I came of age in the 80s. I know in the 70s, the coaches hit the girls. That kind of ended. But... And then we know there was rampant sexual abuse. I mean, that's been exposed because of Larry Nassar, but he was not one bad apple. It was everywhere. Like at my gym where I trained and became the national champion, 2 out of the 8 coaching staff were known pedophiles.
Wow.
That's a pretty high number.
Yeah.
The national team coach, his name's Don Peters, who was the national team coach throughout the 80s, 84 Olympic team, rapists. And we knew, I traveled around the world with this man. I mean, we were all sent. And this is the thing that's so messed up is like, we all knew, don't go near Don, stay away from Don. But you knew also you weren't supposed to say anything. He was this very well-regarded, respected coach. And so the idea, and I wrote about this in my first book because he never touched me, but the idea that we were sent around the world with him and everybody knew and you were just supposed to keep quiet and try to stay away.
Right.
Shows such a disregard for children. And so I guess my point is, like the doctors I had, I think I told you earlier today, we had a doctor that came to the gym every month or 6 weeks and just shot us all up with cortisone. Mm. We weren't 18. There was no permission asked. You just, I had a broken ankle. So all we were tools for these coaches to solidify their reputations, for USA Gymnastics officials and leaders to generate sponsorship dollars. Like no one cared about us. And we don't really care about kids. I guess that's what I grew up in.
Yeah.
And even though my parents are nice, my dad's a pediatrician, even they were like, well, that's just how it is. It's just tough coaching. And so then when schools closed, and we clearly put kids' needs last during COVID. I mean, they were least at risk and the most restricted for the longest period of time. I mean, that's not really debatable, right? I mean, like at the LA Super Bowl, we just had Super Bowl, right? LA Super Bowl, SoFi Stadium, 60,000 fans laughing, drinking. The next day, preschoolers had to mask in preschool, 2-year-olds. That doesn't say we don't give a shit about children. I don't know what does. And so I shouldn't be surprised at the disregard for children that continues to manifest itself in all sorts of ways. Like I've seen it since I was a child, and now I feel like we see it over and over again.
Yeah. I think in your circumstance, it's almost like they forgot you were children. They tried to treat you like adults. That's what it sounds like to me, because you're a professional, right?
That is true.
And so, well, if you're a professional, I'm going to treat you like a professional. So I'm going to give you the adult treatment and disregard that you're still developing, physically, mentally. You're still trying to figure these things out while you're training like an absolute maniac to fulfill some sort of objective. Meanwhile, you're still trying to figure yourself.
But they could, to go back to the point about no one thinks they're evil, in their minds, you came to me because you wanted to be, I'm saying this in their defense.
Right.
You want to be the best. That's what I'm giving to you. This is what's required. If you can't handle it, you are weak, you're a loser, and that was all sort of like motivating tactics. But it was also true. If you can't handle it, move on. There's somebody else that wants up. She's next in line.
Right.
And I sort of thought in my young mind, and I was probably thinking about it more than many of my teammates, I was like, this is just what's required right now. When I am done with the sport and I walk out the door, I'll be fine. Well, that's not how it works, because if you've been berated for 10 years in your training, you internalize that. And so you walk out feeling worthless.
Right.
And it's hard to recover from that. But to come back to your point, I mean, I'm just making the point that I think we often dismiss children and don't, put their needs first. But as far as the mutilation of children, I think for me, the disregard and the pain caused to children, horrific. The other piece of that story, which for me is so horrific, is it seems the most obvious example of being told you must further a lie. Sex is not binary. If you can get people to say that, what can't you get them to say?
Right.
That's what sets me on fire. I mean, and of course, yes, the harm to children, but no, I'm not saying that. it's so fundamental. It's such a fundamental truth. And as far as I know, there's been no new discovery that I'm not aware of. And now, but all of a sudden people are saying sex is not binary. Men aren't stronger than women. There's no proof of that. Mm-hmm. What? And everyone just nods like, yeah, no. Well, that's the thing is, though, they don't just nod. The vast majority of Americans, like if we apply this to the sporting arena, the vast majority of Americans do not think that trans-identified males should be competing in women's sports, but they're so terrified to say it.
Yeah. It's become political. And I think a lot of people, they use empathy, right? They want to be empathetic to someone who is struggling. And I'm empathetic to someone who's struggling.
Me too.
But I'm also someone that says, you can't get everything, right?
Right.
Like, life is not fair. We'll do our best to make things fair.
Yeah.
But sometimes trying to make things fair creates unfairness. And maybe there are ways that someone who feels this way, who maybe they say that they're trans, that they can get into athletics. But I don't think this is the appropriate way to do it, by completely erasing
half the population,
where you have a very clear advantage. So, I would like for them to compete, right? But I don't have all the answers. I'm sure there are alternatives if people really want to do it, but I just don't think this is the way forward. But I'm like this, and there may be conservatives who don't agree with me. If someone wants to mutilate their body as an adult, I don't want you to mutilate your body, but if you so choose to want to do so, then ruin your life. Like, to me, freedom allows for you to ruin your life, to fail, to do these things.
That is true, I mean, compared to the opioid, don't medical professionals have some obligation to try to keep us safe? You think about the opioid crisis and the overprescription of, opioids, which led to overdoses, and this whole idea that underpinned it, which was a marketing ploy by, pharma. No one has to live with any pain. Yeah, sometimes you do. We don't get to eliminate all the pain.
Right.
And, there was clear medical malfeasance, pharma malfeasance. I think the same has been true during COVID, and I think the same is true with I don't even know how to label it, the ideological movement around gender and sex at the moment. So I agree with you. If you want to make that choice, it is irresponsible for medical professionals to leave. Lobotomies are a major medical scandal now, despite the fact that the guy that invented it, I think, won the Nobel Prize. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
And simply 10 years later, it's viewed. I kind of, this is why my former friends hate me. I see this, and I have no doubt 10, 20, I don't know how many years from now, this will be viewed as a major scandal, medical malpractice scandal.
I feel the same exact way. And I usually use the lobotomy analogy as well. I don't think we could continue to do this evil act, especially when it comes to children.
I agree. But I think it's going to go on for a while longer.
It is, because there's a lot of money in it.
There's a lot of money. I hate using they, because people are like, it's they. It has seeped into the culture as
somewhat acceptable.
There's so many factors here. Oh my God, this issue is very complicated, right?
Yeah.
So if you're a good liberal, you believe this is true and that anyone can be any sex and you're in the wrong body. So there's that. Then there's, young people who are unhappy and dissatisfied, and they're sort of led down this path. Oh, and by the way, you also get to sort of claim victim status, which has clout now. So if you are a white girl, you don't have much clout in the world right now, and suddenly if you're trans, you do. And it's just, there's so many factors here, you know, and not to mention young girls, adolescents, and young boys. I mean, who likes going through puberty? Mm-hmm. It's terrible. And now if you're told, well, if you don't like it and you're uncomfortable with your body, perhaps you're not actually a girl.
Yeah.
No, you are. But they've sort of, the ideologues on this have kind of captured the language, the way we talk about it, everything, the culture, the art, the brands, the medicine. And so there's too much invested. I think my belief, and I could totally be wrong on this, is the problem is in 5 years, 10 years time, there's going to be so many detransitioners that it's going to be too big to ignore.
Yeah. And that's where lawsuits start coming in.
It's heartbreaking. Yeah. But that's what it will take.
Yeah. I feel like, especially when there's a profit motive, lawsuits are the way to stop all this.
That's the mechanism we have.
You know, whether it be some big class action lawsuit that scares the shit out of everybody, like, listen, I need to think about this again. Yeah. You know, I think there are always going to be the trans doctors where this is all they do, and they're going to fight tooth and nail to make it happen. But the other ones who are just being like, listen, you know, there's a lot of money that's in it. It seems like everyone taking the opportunity to do it. They're going to start to pull away. You're going to start seeing hospitals who are going to be like, listen, this is becoming too much. Yeah. You know, this is becoming too controversial.
Too much.
You know, we got people like Libs of TikTok.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, they're also going to be like, it's not just all right. Like, it's going to be too many people. It's not just Libs of TikTok. It's not just the people we think are the bad people. There's like a lot of people who are, you know, are pushing
the children
back.
Are going to eventually grow up.
Yeah.
Right. And they're eventually going to say, like, you wronged me as a child, and we're going to start to try and hold you liable. Yeah. You know.
Well, we're seeing it unwind in Europe already, right? In Northern European countries, in the UK, they're closing Tavistock, they're closing all these facilities, but they're all 10 years ahead of us. They started it first. They were sort of the vanguard. And so if you think of it that way, they're 10 years ahead. They're already experiencing that. Right. The detransitioners that have suffered the harm, or the problems that they said would be solved, that, you know, any discomfort, depression, suicidality, that would resolve. And they're seeing that it did not resolve. There were other fundamental core issues. And so, and there's physical problems with the puberty blockers and how that, you know, which they always said was reversible. They're seeing now that there are long-term harms. I mean, I think the other interesting thing in all of it is this notion that I'm not a religious person. Are you a religious person? Yeah. You are. All my friends now are religious. I have tremendous respect. But I think that there is, you know, with the increasing non-belief in the country, we think of humans as like material things that can be altered and changed with medicine. Right. Not as people with a soul. They're these mechanical, I mean, think about it, that's kind of how it was during COVID, right? Like people, if you were treated like you were some like thing in a model, just stay home till I tell you can leave and it'll be fine. Well, people can't do that. Right? Yeah. It's kind of like that. We can just change you. We'll just cut those bits off and add some new ones, and that's the same. Then you are a female. Well, no, you're not. That isn't. We're not machines. But there's this like disconnection from the human spirit and the soul, which I'm sort of thinking of as religious. Although the irony is they seem to think you have a gendered spirit, these atheists. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense. That's some people talk about transhumanism and that effect, you know.
But all of it, it's like the Ozempic, all of it, like just take a thing and you can be a different person. It's all bad. Yeah. I really think it's all just terrible.
I think the further we get away from the natural, the worse we become. And it's unnatural for human beings to isolate themselves.
It is unnatural for human beings to isolate themselves and to mutilate their genitals.
Yes. And that's why, like in jail, your punishment is isolation.
Right.
Right? That's how they try to control you, and you go insane.
Right.
Because we're group-oriented creatures.
Insane. Well, I don't think I went insane, but like people went insane. I ask people all the time, I'm curious what you think. Like, why in the summer of 2020? Why is that? I mean, it was, granted, we saw it. We saw what happened to George Floyd. We don't have to get into, but like, we had seen there were other videos. Why was it the summer of 2020 that people took to the streets?
I think it was the powder keg of people being isolated.
Me too.
On top of it being an election year, on top of Trump, and it just
blew up
in front of us, and everybody just took to the streets and let out a whole bunch of steam. Yeah.
4 months at that point, we'd been.
Yeah, when you put it like that, that's quite some time.
4 months is a long time.
Yeah.
And in that 4 months, people had lost their jobs. They, I mean,
couldn't go to school. Maybe they were in college, couldn't go to school. Their jobs were furloughed. Like all types of stuff.
If you lived alone, think about what that was like.
Oh yeah. You know what? There's so many people I talked to who lived in New York City, and we all know how cramped those apartments are, and they couldn't leave.
Yeah.
And even if they could leave, nothing was open.
Right.
They were going, like someone that I know just moved to New York City just before the pandemic. And they were like, oh, I'll never be home. I'll be out and about.
Oh, they lived in a tiny
apartment.
But in San Francisco, one of my good friends, single, no children, from the beginning, I was like, you're not doing that. You're not, because they said, if you live alone, you stay home. They overtly said, no, you can't have dinner at a friend. No. How do you treat a human being like that?
Yeah.
And we said to her from the very beginning, no, you're welcome here anytime. And she was over 2 or 3 days a week the entire time. You can't, that's horrible.
And that probably saved her life.
Well, it certainly saved her sanity.
Yeah.
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 But others didn't do it. And in blocking people out, they felt very virtuous.
Yeah.
But it broke my heart to think about a single person living alone, being alone all the time.
Yeah, the 2020 is a weird year because I became serious with my now wife in 2019, at the end of 2019. And actually we were supposed to travel in March of 2020. So we booked everything 6 months ahead, and we were ready to go. And then that week, because we had some soccer games that we were going to go to.
Where were you going?
We were going to go to Berlin and then go to the other side of Germany to see Borussia Dortmund play. Then we were going to go to, I think, maybe Amsterdam, and then we were supposed to go to Spain and then make our way to Madrid to see Real Madrid play.
Okay. So
we were supposed to do all that, and I remember hearing the German Bundesliga has canceled the games. And I was like, oh no, what's happening with Spain? And Spain canceled the games. And then we were supposed to fly out that Friday. And I think it was Thursday night. My wife is on her way to my place in New Jersey. And she gets a call from me. And she's like, why are you calling? I'm on my way. And I said, Trump just announced the travel ban. And she's like, what the hell does this mean? And at first we thought it was like nobody could travel. And then we realized it was people who were not U.S. citizens couldn't come into the country.
Yeah.
But our flight was still scheduled for that Friday. And I was like, should we still go? And I was like, no. I have a feeling if we're doing it.
You would never gotten home.
Yeah. We would have been stuck.
Smart not to go, yeah.
Yeah. So we were very fortunate of when it happened that we weren't already
stuck
there.
Over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, people were stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was such a crazy time. I cannot believe we lived through that.
I know. And now, with just like how during COVID, I would look at videos of like concerts and like, wow, that was before. Now I look at COVID stuff and I was like, it's like bizarro world. Like
It
looking at
is.
it, I was like, what is going on?
It's so crazy we did that.
Yeah.
I don't, no one cares.
Oh, it's over. Anyway, so how's your life?
No one cares. I'm like, they told you couldn't leave your house.
Mm-hmm.
They told you couldn't have people in your house. You couldn't go to church. You couldn't go to an AA meeting.
If you had people over, they cut off your electricity like in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
I thought that was the most tyrannical move ever.
People are, why are you still talking? Why do you care? Still? It's over.
Because it can happen again.
Exactly. To me, because I know, for COVID dissenters, everybody has different like a different angle to it.
Mm-hmm.
To me, lockdowns that's the original sin. That can never happen again. I cannot, that is like, it underpins every wrong thing that happened. And it became a tool, like an acceptable tool in the toolbox.
Yeah.
I mean, for a lot of people, it's vaccine mandates, but I'm like, we can never have lockdowns. That it's a moral atrocity. We can't call ourselves a free country if we can be locked down at any time.
And you know what's crazy? As bad as things were, I know people who are in Europe who had it way worse.
Where?
In Germany. Germany was one of the places. I remember seeing
footage. Well, look,
in
New
France.
Zealand, Australia.
Yep. New Zealand especially, yeah.
California was pretty bad. But yes, they were New Zealand was worse, but California was bad.
It was quite literally you can't go and get basics.
Right.
Right? Like I remember seeing footage from Germany, you have to, if you were vaccinated, you go on one line into the store, unvaccinated in another line. Like you were literally separated. And it was so bizarre to watch. I had a friend who was living in Berlin at the time, and she was kind of by herself, and she worked for a company, and she didn't want to get vaccinated, and every time she had to go to the office, she had to get tested. Every time.
They did that in California. I mean, think they did that in a lot of places in America, but yeah, they definitely did that in California. Terrible.
Yeah, and she going into the office multiple times a week.
Well, and they also made if you weren't vaccinated, even if you got tested, you had to mask. So there was like wearing this the yellow star. You're announcing yourself as unvaccinated, so that everybody stays away and you're kind of shunned.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't believe it. And yes, everything's normal. I mean, and I don't just mean like life feels normal. I mean like air travel's back to, higher than 2019 levels. Like everything did come back despite Fauci's best efforts. Mm-hmm. People shake hands. I still feel like it's all now because we haven't said that can never happen again. It was wrong. It's all in the toolbox.
Right.
And you see schools closed from time to time for whatever, whether migrants, there was the public high school in New York, I think. Mm-hmm. If we hadn't done this, that couldn't happen. It's like it's in the mix as something you can do. And unless we say that was not only a disaster, it was a moral atrocity and we can never do that again, it will be in the mix.
Yeah.
And that's what I find so disturbing, and no one seems to care, except for like 4 of us.
Yeah, I think that it's the weaponization of the word emergency.
Oh, for sure.
That's what we see with the migrant situation. Listen, we got to go past the budget because of an emergency.
Yeah.
But, you guys actually needed something? Listen.
Not an emergency.
It's not an emergency, right? So it's that kind of thing. It's a convenient use to have budget deficits. It's a convenient use to lose your freedom, to give other people who aren't supposed to be here benefits.
But it's so. I guess what shocked me and what I still find really disturbing is people are are very willing to give up their freedom in exchange for supposed safety. They're very willing, which is what tyrants always do. That's what authoritarians do.
Right.
That's how authoritarian regimes take over. They get people to agree to hand over their freedom for safety.
Yeah.
I didn't think we would do that here in America.
Now we know.
Young people seem the most willing to do it. Almost. I try to think back when I was in college. If the government and the university said to me, you have to stay in your room. You can only leave for food or a medical test. You can't exercise. You can't go to parties. There's no class. Do it on Zoom. There was no Zoom. There's no way I would have done it. We would have been partying.
Right.
That's not what young people did.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe like in Florida, spring break. Remember when everybody was mad at the spring breakers?
Yeah.
But other than that, the kids in California didn't do that. They were very obedient. They're still masking at Berkeley.
Yeah. I mean,
where's the rebels? Kids are not, they're supposed to be like, no way, I'm going to party.
Well, I'll tell you why. The more comfortable they are, the more willing they're willing to comply. It's the kid. Like for me, I didn't have a comfortable life.
Yeah.
So, I have a healthy amount of distrust for authority, right? I respect authority.
Yeah.
But I also recognize that you should question it, especially now.
Yeah. I had a Lyft driver recently, not here in Nashville where we are talking, but who was from Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And he told me the story of how he came here and how his family came here and what his childhood was like. It was a long drive. And he somehow, I didn't bring it up, but he transitioned to pronouns and how he was like, Americans just have it too easy. Like, who cares? Why? Like, that's what you're making a stink about?
Because they have no struggle.
Yeah.
That's why I think humans are about... I think about the movie Matrix. I don't know if you remember The Architect.
I don't remember, but I think you posted this today. Did you? Did you post something about?
No, not today.
Okay, somebody posted something about the Matrix recently that I saw, and I was like, oh, I need to go back and watch it again. Okay, tell me. So
there's a part where they meet the architect.
Okay.
He's the person who helped design the Matrix.
Okay.
And what he said was the first implementation of the Matrix was a perfect world, and the humans rejected it. And I believe that. Like, we want there to be some sort of issue. What if everything worked out? What if everything came true? What if, we would reject it? We wouldn't even watch that TV show.
It's boring.
It would be boring. We wouldn't like it at all. So we need to have some sort of struggle. We need to have some sort of hurdle, right? Even if it's the tiniest of a hurdle.
We have to create one.
We have to create it, right? If we don't have one, we will create one.
Right.
And so, you have these people who grow up extremely privileged, got everything that they wanted, and they're susceptible for someone saying, you should feel guilty for getting everything you wanted because someone else doesn't have it. And you're like, you know what? I should feel guilty for that. Yes, tell me how bad I am. Yes, I need to really work on that. That's my struggle. My struggle is that I get everything that I want, and now I need to sacrifice myself. Like, they just go through, they invent these things, so they can have some sort of struggle. But people who have a real struggle, they don't think and talk like this because they've been through that. Like, when you don't know where you're sleeping the next day, when you've bounced around from hotel room to hotel room, you don't give a shit. That's like, I actually I tweeted something out about when people say unhoused, and I'm just like,
do they really care?
They don't.
It's so stupid.
They don't.
No.
And then I had people who said, like, I've worked in this industry and I've heard homeless people laugh.
Sure.
When they say unhoused, they're like, why are you even saying that?
Why is it even better?
Why?
Like, what's better about it? It's so
well,
dumb.
I know why they say it.
Why?
Because unhoused implies someone took it from you.
Oh.
Capitalism took it from you.
You were unhoused.
You were unhoused. They removed it from you. You would have a house, but they took it away from you.
But being homeless is like
it's just a state.
It's you. It's a state of being. And
yeah. They have to.
Okay, it's so dumb.
Well, this is.
And there's going to be a new word next.
Yeah.
There'll be some other word after this word, and then another word, and then it'll get more complicated. And it's so beside the point.
Right. Because it's not really about the homeless.
Well, look. I mean, does anyone say African American anymore?
No. Although I never really liked it. I always liked black.
Yeah. I mean, what was the year when that became like you had to say it?
I think it was something with Jesse Jackson.
It was like
in the 80s.
But then in the 90s, it became like the thing you had to say.
Yeah, exactly.
Like when political correctness was, taking hold. And my first husband is black, and we weren't married then when it started, but he never liked it, and we mocked it, and you could see people's discomfort. They didn't know what to say or how to, and he would always say, like, I can tell, you can say African American, I could still tell if you're like, he had a great phrase. He would say, it's your intent, not the content. Like, it doesn't matter what the word is. Like, I can tell if you're hateful, even if you're saying the right word. Exactly. And vice versa. But we're not supposed to say that anymore. Now it's black, but it's black with a capital B. That's changed recently.
Yes. Yeah, that's a whole...
Okay, what are your feelings on the capital B?
All right, so this is part of the problem. I understand why they say it. Yeah. But I also understand the deeper meaning and the people who are pushing it. And so that's why I'm
rejecting it.
Yeah, I reject it. I think if it didn't come from nefarious people, I would be more open to it.
What's the good and the bad?
So I think the whole emphasis behind it is that Black Americans are painted as descendants of slaves who had their ancestry taken from them. So if someone is Italian, right, they have a homeland they can refer to. Yeah. If you called someone Italian, you have a capital I. Right. Right. So they're trying to find some sort of heritage, some sort of cultural point. Marker. So Black is the marker. So if I can capitalize I in Italian, you can capitalize B for Black. Okay. The problem I have is that I see it come from very crazy Marxists. And they're the ones who are pushing it the most. And so I'm very hesitant to take that on, even if they're making sort of a good argument, because it's a good argument now, but that's how they get you, get through the door. That's the next. It's the next thing.
Have to, I mean, I'm not just talking about that one. Yes, even if it's a good argument, you have to kind of reject it out of pocket. Yeah. Because it just is it's such a slippery slope. It's like, we're just going to lock you down for 2 weeks. It's just 2 weeks.
To slow down the spread.
It's just 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Yeah. Okay, it's flat, but now you need to stay home until, I don't know, maybe something came before, flattening the curve. It was always something, to manage the hospital capacity, but the hospitals aren't full. I'm checking every day. Well, they will be. Mm-hmm. So you have to stay home another 3 weeks. Now you have to stay home because if we let you out, then it'll come back. Right. Well, now we're so close, we have to stay home until we get the vaccine. It's like, you cannot give an inch.
Right. That's exactly it. You make an argument, but I see what you guys do. Every time I adhere to it,
you take a little more.
You take a little bit more. So I'm like, I get it, but no.
Yeah, I'm not doing it.
I'm not doing it. I'm not putting my pronouns.
Yeah,
once I do that, then it's something else. No, I'm not doing it.
The issue with the pronouns is, first of all, it was like a thing at work, in my last days, and I just quietly never did it. Mm-hmm. And like, I've worked here 23 years. I've been pregnant 4 times. You know what I mean.
I know.
Like, I'm sorry, I'm not doing it. And then your argument is, it makes just to be nice, it makes other people more comfortable. No, because what underpins it is this idea that we can't know your gender unless you tell us.
Right.
And that it's fluid and it can change at any time. And no, you know mine. I don't grant that you can't know it unless somebody tells you.
The weird thing about pronouns is that I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you and calling you she.
Well, that's the other thing, is you can totally get around never using them.
Right.
Because if you wanted to be whatever, the only time I would use it is when I'm not with you and you don't know, so who cares?
Exactly.
Right.
That's the weird.
Mostly I try to get around it. It's sometimes harder in writing.
Here's what I sometimes do. I say they, right? Like they're doing this, right? Rather than she. So yes. I'm not specific, especially if I'm talking about, like, if I'm making critique about something online and someone looks kind of weird and I'm like, I don't know, they?
Right.
I don't know what this is.
The poor grammar involved in that makes me crazy.
Yeah.
Meaning not you doing it, but like somebody saying I'm a they.
Well, that's different.
No, you aren't.
Yeah. That's different. I'm more so saying, like, I have no idea, so I'm just gonna be like, yeah, they're doing that. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to be purposefully rude, but I also don't want to. Actually, I don't care if it's purposely rude. Like, I don't want to further a lie.
Yeah. If it's obvious, I'm saying he or she. But
right.
If it's
I
ambiguous,
also feel like there's certain trans people, notable, sort of noteworthy, who I feel like are still very much like Buck Angel. I don't know these people, but I follow them, right? Mm-hmm. He will say, I am female and am more comfortable living my life presenting as a male. Mm-hmm. But I am female. I know that I am female. Me having a disorder that makes it so that I am more comfortable living my life this way and have been for 30 years doesn't change the fact that I am female. Like, he's
honest,
sane and honest. Like, why do we have to? That I have no. Then I'm like, fine, you're a he. Like, then I don't care. But right. It's like, I don't. Why do we have to? There's something about how we do it all the time. Like, we do it not just in this issue of gender. Like, it can't just be that somebody is trans and is more comfortable presenting as female. It is they are a woman. Mm-hmm.
They always were.
They always were. And sex is assigned, not observed at birth. Why we have to change everything? There's no such thing as a disorder. There's no such thing. I mean, we do it with addiction. We do it, like, everything has to get normalized so people don't feel shame.
Right.
Sexual fetishes are all normalized and out in public and in the, like, no, I've been going to drag since there's a lot of drag in San Francisco. I have lots of friends who did drag. Mm-hmm. I've been going to drag shows since I was 21 years old. I mean, I don't much anymore. I'm in my 50s. But, like, I went to a lot of drag shows in San Francisco. The whole point of drag is that it's subversive.
Right.
Why does it now need to be in the library? It's like we have this compulsion to make everything normal by putting it out in the open in front of children.
Yeah. So
that people don't feel shame. Some things aren't for children and some things aren't normal.
Yeah. There's a purposeful blurring of the line, right? Much like what you experience. There's that blurring where you're not really a child, you're a professional and you want to be an athlete, right? It's that.
It is purposeful, but the point I have made about gymnastics in particular is it's a blurry line. Tough coaching, abuse, it's blurry. Yeah. No, it isn't. I don't accept that. It's not blurry.
Yeah.
It isn't blurry. And don't make me say it. I know you're not trying to. But, like, because I got attacked, when I wrote my first book, it was, well, I don't know, it's tough. I'm like, and then as it became clearer and clearer that it was abuse, people in defending themselves, well, it was blurry. No, when you starve children, when you force them to train on broken bones, and when you bully them, that's not fuzzy, blurry. That's abuse. It's clear cut. right? And so they want us to think it's blurry, but it's not blurry.
Yeah.
The Folsom Street Fair in San Francisco, which is a leather fair that I have used to go to in my 20s, not in leather, but everybody went, adults. It was like a part. Now it's like kids. It's like if you don't expose your kids to these fetishes, why that it's like that's how it's getting normalized, so people don't feel shame. No one's crazy. No one. I mean, there's other ways to dissipate shame. You don't need to have a child watch.
Right.
But you're right. That fuzzy. That's the way they kind of reel you in, and I just refuse that. It's not fuzzy.
Yeah. We're nearing the end.
Okay.
But I wanted to. I always ask people, are you optimistic about the future?
It's a good question.
Sometimes. This is a good answer.
I personally am. I think, despite how difficult my last 4 years have been, I'm an optimistic person, and I believe truth outs in the end, and that it sucks to go first, but eventually people come around to the truth.
I'm also an optimist. I look at, like, for someone like yourself, everything you've been through, and you've always found some sort of way to overcome those obstacles. And not only that, but you use those obstacles as a lesson and a warning for other people. So I think that kind of thing is admirable. And I think there are becoming more people who are like yourself. I'm trying to do much of the same with my experience as a child, as a warning, right? Rather than just keeping it to myself and just, no, I want to talk about it. I want to expose my childhood so people understand that this exists. This is a real thing that's happening.
Yes.
And, who knows how much you have shifted gymnastics culture because you were willing to expose it.
Oh, for sure. I believe wholeheartedly Larry Nassar and that whole scandal, the doctor that abused over 500 athletes, would not, I'm not giving myself all the credit, but there was me and there was Dominique Mosianu, and we started talking about these things 10 years before. Those girls, and I say this because they've told me this, would never have come forward if me, Dom, a couple others hadn't gone first.
Yeah.
So I 100% believe that. And then, I made this movie Athlete A, and that really that just blew the doors open, because it allowed, and this is what I was hoping, in my wildest dreams, I never thought it would go the way it did, but that people could see their own stories in the film, and that you did not have to be abused at the hands of Larry Nassar to have suffered and been abused in the sport. And that's exactly what happened. And these athletes from around the world, 10 different countries, more than 10, they started this campaign on social media where they told their stories, and they used a hashtag Athlete Alliance or Gymnast Alliance. I was watching it unfold in real time, and they were making these long posts about what had happened to them. Most were not sexual abuse.
Right.
But they'd never seen the emotional and physical abuse as problematic. They saw it as tough coaching.
Right,
and that they were just too weak to handle it. So then they internalized the shame. And somehow this movie let them see it. And I think as I was going through the COVID stuff, I kept thinking of what happened in gymnastics. And I was like, it sucked. It was terrible for the first 3 years. And then everybody saw it. Was 10 years though. And so I just, I just thought everyone's going to see that this isn't good, that what we're doing to children isn't good. And I still think that's true. I just forgot it took 10 years before I thought. So I did not beat the buzzer. But I'm optimistic, because I think eventually the truth always outs, and that there's enough. I mean, the bright side for me is I've met so many amazing people who are brave.
Yeah. Same here.
So I have almost greater faith in humanity because I've met so many courageous people.
Yeah, it's so strange. Yourself, who's been canceled, or it's so weird saying canceled.
It's canceled.
Yeah,
it's fine. It's fine.
But who've gone through these experiences, who are just trying to live a regular life, and they they go down and they struggle and suffer, and then they come out realizing that there's so many people who are on their side, and they get embraced, and they grow out of it. Like there are people, I say people who were born out of 2020, like this is 2020 rebirth, right? Just born to do something greater than they thought they would be able to do, and completely rocked their world and did something else, and now they're stronger because of it. You know, so like I sat down with Colin Wright, same thing. You know, canceled, and now look what he's doing today. Yourself canceled, and now you're trying to create something. And you found a community that seems to be more principled and
you
freedom
have
loving.
to though let go of, I don't know Colin, I mean I follow him, but like you have to let go of whatever like that structure was that you held up as like the one you wanted to succeed in. For him it was, you know, academia. For, you know, Barry, it was the New York Times. For me, it was an existing corporate culture. I was very happy existing within that, trying to be a good person within that, taking care of the people that work for me, helping them build careers. Like, I never wanted to start my own thing.
Right.
I was good with the ballast of that. And the status of it, you know? I mean, I wasn't a particularly status-y person, but it was like, I don't know, I was proud that I worked at, you know, at Levi's. It was a cool brand. I was proud that I helped it go public. I helped save it from, you know, bankruptcy. So you had to let go of all that. You know, for Colin, it's I don't even know how he makes a living now, but like, you know, the structure of a university and tenure and all of that. And it's a little hard.
No,
I
I
mean,
can imagine.
I'm over it. I am over it. But like, I mean, Barry's talked eloquently about it, you know, because Barry Weiss, you know, she's building her own thing, which I think is very important within the new media ecosphere. But, you know, she had a dream job working at the New York Times. That was kind of what she wanted. And then you realize it's not what you wanted.
Right.
So it's a little like getting divorced, I guess. It's hard. But I think you're right. Now I'm excited. Because by the time you show this, I'll have launched a new brand, which is not something I ever thought I was going to do before, but I'm excited.
Yeah.
And thank you for participating.
Oh, it was my absolute pleasure.
It was fun.
Yeah. Well, we'll end it here.
Awesome.
And thank you so much for sitting down with me.
Thanks for having me.
For inviting me out here to Nashville.
Awesome.
It was an absolute pleasure. And I hope to work together with you.
Me too.
In the future.
Me too. Thanks for the hot chicken.
I hope you enjoyed it.
I did. I ate it.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.